Speaking of our Han tribe market, now that you've decided to use animal hides as the common currency, let me tell you, our hide reserves are off the charts. After clothing and equipping all our people, we can even use the surplus to whip up some luxuries, like those massive cowhide drums. Last spring's sacrifice ceremony had just one measly drum. Now, we've got 8 of the same size, perched on either side of our fortress gates. Acting as our early warning system, we've got over a dozen warriors assigned to guard those gates. For per gate, 2 huddle inside the gatehouse, keeping warm by the fire, while the other to patrol the walls. Rotating shifts every so often, or unlikely. These walls are so darn high. No enemy could possibly scale them, unless they had a ladder. But I haven't heard of a single tribe inventing the ladder yet. So, truth be told, these guards are more for show, mainly around to open and close the gates. It was 7 days after the second big snowfall of winter, when you were busy with Big Mouth casting a massive iron pot for the old press. Suddenly, the drums at the south gate of the Han tribe started booming. Thump thump thump, the sound echoed throughout Hanyang City, scaring the living daylights out of you. You're racking your brain trying to figure out what's going on. Then you realize, hey, it's just one drum. That eased your mind right away. We've got 2 drums per gate in Hanyang. If we're under attack, both drums go wild. If only a small group approaches and we decide they're not a threat, we just beat 1 drum. Those were your rules. So, just by listening, you could figure out the situation outside. You guys keep casting the pot. It's not an attack, don't worry. I'm going to check out the south gate. Yes, sir, we understand. Be careful. Chief, you tossed a couple of instructions to Big Mouth, grabbed your trusty sword, and hightailed it to the south gate. Climbing up to the gatehouse, the guards saw you coming and stopped drumming. What's going on? Why the drumming? Who are those guys down there? You poked your head over the battlements and saw 8 strangers milling about outside the south gate, craning their necks to look up at the wall. Chief, they just arrived. They walked around for a bit, then started gesturing at us, and they saw someone on the wall. Sounds like they want to trade. I heard them yell market, one of the guards explained. Trade? In the dead of winter, and they're not carrying anything. What are they planning to trade? You squinted at them again. A bit suspicious, we're not sure. So we weren't sure whether to open the gate. That's why we sounded the drum. The guard reply, open the gate, lower the drawbridge. It's only a few people. They can't cause too much trouble. You decided, addressing the guards. Yes, Chief. The guards, hearing your orders, quickly cranked the winch, lowering the drawbridge. Then they followed you down from the wall, ready to open the gate and see what was up. These 8 belonged to a small tribe of fewer than 100 souls. They'd been to the Han tribe market before, but your prices were too steep, and they didn't have enough hides or anything else you'd want. So they took a look around and left empty-handed, but now, their food supplies were running dangerously low. They figured they had maybe a month left, tops. They had planned to hunt, to dig up some hibernating critters for a snack. Then came a massive snowfall that blanketed everything. Desperate, they decided to try their luck with our Han tribe again, hoping for some help, but they nearly had a heart attack when they arrived. The last time they'd seen the place, back in autumn. The walls were just getting started. Just a moat was really something. Now, the moat was frozen solid, and a towering wall stood where there had been nothing, rising towards the sky. If they hadn't spotted the drawbridge sticking out, they might not have found the entrance. After a careful look, they saw people on top of this huge thing, and they were wearing Han-style hair buns. Then they knew they were at the right place. After they yelled a few words back and forth, the drumming started again on the walls, nearly sending them running. If it weren't for their tribe's very survival hanging in the balance, they might have just turned tail and run. Our Han tribe was just too darn intimidating, with all these crazy things everywhere. They waited a bit longer, and then the drums fell silent, and the drawbridge slowly creaked down, revealing a vermilion gate behind it. After a moment of awe, they gathered by the edge of the drawbridge, still too afraid to cross. Inside the gate, Yuan for warriors holding copper spears stood in the gatehouse. You unfastened the thick wooden bar blocking the gates, creaked the gate open a crack, and you got a good look at the 8 of them. They were wearing tattered, drafty animal skins. their noses and ears bright red with cold, frostbite on their hands and feet. They clutch their stone spears and bone clubs, shivering and looking at you and the warriors with weary eyes. You put your hand on the hilt of your sword and waved them forward, signaling them to come in. They cautiously stepped onto the drawbridge and then came to the gate. You had them surrender their weapons before leading them inside. You took them to an empty house. Each person was given a bowl of stew meant for the slaves. Then you began the questioning. You say you're here to trade. Trade what? You haven't brought anything worth bartering with. Have you, oh, mighty leader of the Han tribe? It's like this. Our tribe is running low on food. The snow's been bad this year. The hunt's been poor. We were hoping to borrow some food from the Han tribe. We don't have anything to trade right now, but we promise to pay you back next year when we've hunted. We will give everything we can. Is that all right? The leader stammered. You chuckled. Borrow food. In this day and age, you'd heard of borrowing salt or soy sauce in the village. But food, and they expect to pay it back. They can't even feed themselves. And they expect to have a surplus next year. What a joke. Borrowing is out of the question. We have plenty of food in the Han tribe. But we're not giving it away to everyone. But I understand your plight, and I'm not saying I won't help. So, you say you're here to trade. Let's trade for some food. You don't have hides or special items. Fine, you have people, don't you? Since your tribe can't feed them. How about you give those people to the Han tribe? And we'll trade you some food for them. That way, you lighten your load, and we get more manpower and more food reserves. Win-win, right? What do you say? Think about it. The leader of the group hesitated. Frozen like someone under a spell, he'd never considered the Han tribe might offer such a solution. This wasn't something they'd prepped for back at the tribe. His mouth clamped shut as if glue, at a complete loss for words, of course. If your tribe doesn't want to split up, I have an even better idea. How about your whole tribe joins the Han tribe? Become one of us, and you'll have solid, warm houses, food aplenty, and more hides than you could ever use. What do you say? You can go back and talk it over with your tribe, and if you agree, you can move here right away. You pressed, thinking they'd be ecstatic about such a sweet deal. We can't decide, but we'll tell our chief. Whether he agrees or not, I don't know. Though I'd love to stay here in the Han tribe myself. It's amazing. I'll tell everyone what it's like. I'm sure they'll love it too. The leader said, his eyes shining with envy. Good. Very good. I won't keep you any longer. I hope you make the right choice. If you decide to come, the Han tribe will always welcome you. With the conversation over, you stood up to see them off. The gate guards quickly let them out. One of the guards who hadn't left stood beside you and asked, Chief, do you think they'll agree to join the Han tribe? Do you think they'll come? How should I know if they'll come? But I bet some of them want to. Who doesn't want a better life? What they decide is up to them. It doesn't matter to us. We don't need them. You said, shaking your head. You thought to yourself that the Han tribe was doing so well. You didn't even care about them. In the days that followed, the Han tribe continued its rapid construction. The oil press was soon finished, and you started pressing tongol. The dried tongol seeds were ground into powder, roasted in a large iron pot, then wrapped in hemcloth into round cakes. The cakes were placed one by one into the oil press. Then, the wooden hammer hanging above was slowly lowered, weighed down with large blue bricks on both sides. A wooden barrel was placed under the oil outlet of the press to catch the squeezed oil. Freshly pressed tongol looked much like soybean oil, light yellow, with a distinctive aroma of tongol. Otherwise, you couldn't tell the difference. This oil was called raw tongol, which wasn't the best to be used as varnish. For the best varnish, you needed coke tongol, made by mixing raw tongol with rosin and cooking it. The final product was thicker, with a deeper amber color, perfect for furniture. But raw tongol wasn't useless. While not the best varnish, it worked great as lamp oil. The arrival of tongol immediately solved the Han tribe's lighting problems. The oil lamps weren't very bright, but it was a start. Before we had windows or doors, an oil lamp inside the house was a huge convenience. Now, the Han tribe wasn't completely dark at night. You felt great. You'd done something good. and got even more popularity points in the tribe. Around this time, the men who had come to beg for food returned to their tribe. The tribe members, who had been waiting anxiously, saw they came back empty-handed, and they all looked disappointed. They were already rationing food, and one meal a day was hard enough to save energy. Many of them stayed huddled in their mud houses, like hibernating animals, hoping for the cold winter to end soon. Didn't you borrow any food? Did the Han tribe refuse, or couldn't you find them? The chief asked the returning men. Chief, we found the Han tribe. But things have changed. We met their chief, but he wouldn't lend us food. But he did say there was a way. Our whole tribe could join the Han tribe. Then we'd have more food than we could eat. The leader told everything that he'd seen in the Han tribe, except for one thing. He didn't mention the part about trading people for food. The 8 of them had decided this on the way back. As adult males, they were essential to the tribe. If they really traded people to the Han tribe, it would most likely be their women and children. They didn't want that, rather than trade their loved ones for food. They'd rather join the Han tribe together, to avoid the tragedy of family separation. They decided to leave that part out and only told the chief about joining the Han tribe as a whole. The chief was surprised. Then, he decided the Han tribe wasn't a good tribe anyway. They had plenty of food but wouldn't lend them many. They were taking advantage of their desperation and threatening them to join the tribe. The chief's reasoning was quite amusing. He was like those modern-day oddballs who think people who are better off should help them, as if it's their right. And if they're refused, they'll call you a bad person. There's no shortage of such people, now or then. The result was predictable. The chief rejected the Han tribe's unreasonable condition. He thought his tribe could tough it out, and they'd get through the winter. He refused to be threatened by the Han tribe. The chief's decision quickly spread. The food rations, already cut to 1 meal a day, were suddenly reduced to 1 meal every 2 days. Plus, they had to risk the cold to find food. The tribe members were not happy. Life was hard enough, and now it was even harder. Although they didn't dare to openly oppose the chief, they were very resentful. The chief thought that was that. But then a mass defection happened. The 8 men who'd gone to the Han tribe had told everyone about what they'd seen and all the benefits of joining. And the tribesmen were all excited. So, after the few of them thought through, they quietly gathered everyone who wanted to go to the Han tribe, and then one night, after everyone was asleep, almost half the tribe got up and followed the 8 men. Escaping in the night, headed for the Han tribe. 2 moons hung in the sky, their silvery light reflecting off the snow-covered ground, making the world seem a little less pitch black. And there they were, a group of 42 men, women, and children, trudging through the snow, their faces etched with hardship. Among them were a few wide-eyed toddlers, clueless about their fate. They'd almost been abandoned by their tribe. But now, they had a glimmer of hope. They dared not light a torch, afraid of being spotted by their tribe. Besides, with this biting wind howling, their torches, lacking proper oils, would be as good as paper, extinguished in a flash. Their food supply was meager. What little they had, they were saving for the kids. They were a tribe unwilling to give up on their children. The tribe's food was guarded by the chief and his cronies. They couldn't steal it, so they had to forage daily, hiding what they found outside the village, scraping together this pathetic amount as their escape fund. The group fought the wind and snow for half the night. By morning, their already depleted energy was dwindling. They took out their gathered food and fed the little ones a bit, then gritted their teeth and continued their escape. Losing half the tribe like that, the chief was bound to be fuming. They wondered if he'd send someone after them. Fortunately, the storm, while hindering their progress, was also burying their tracks, offering them a sliver of relief. They walked another day, but no one followed. It wasn't that the chief hadn't noticed. He wasn't stupid. He knew they were headed for the Han tribe. But they hadn't taken much food. What was left was enough to get the rest of the tribe through the winter. That's why the chief didn't bother chasing. Besides, if he actually chased them, who knew who would win? The escapees weren't that few in number. Even if they caught up, he couldn't just slaughter them all. Could he? Of course not, but leaving them would waste food. And he'd have to constantly worrying about them running off again. Once someone's heart is set on something, They were like a loose cannon. The chief just didn't want to deal with it. No one was chasing them, but the escapees were barely holding on. No campfire for warmth, no hot food. How long could they last? Finally, they decided to send two people to the Han tribe for help. The rest would stay put, gather firewood to keep warm, and scavenge for something to eat. They had to live through this. They waited a week. After 5 days, the two who went for help finally reached the Han tribe. They spent the night freezing at the gate. The next morning, the guards found them. By the time you heard the news and had the gate opened, one had already frozen unconscious. The other, with great effort, managed to explain the situation, learning there were 40 people out there, starving and freezing. Desperate to join the Han tribe, you were anxious. You gave the order to rescue them. 5 makeshift sleds, 20 cavalry soldiers, loaded with animal hides, food, iron pots, and firewood, with the man who was still conscious leading the way. You sent Yu Fu, and the group swiftly set out. It took 2 days for the rescue team to reach them. But it was too late. 5 of the 40 had frozen to death. The rest were on the brink, weak and listless. You couldn't believe it, but they had even eaten the hides they were using for warmth. After burning off the hair, at least the skin would fill their bellies. And the babies were alive because they were drinking their mother's blood. Their mothers, long malnourished, no longer had milk. It was brutal. Even the Han tribe people couldn't help but sigh. Yu Fu ordered iron pots to be set up, cooking rice porridge with jerky. The sleds were loaded with animal hides, which they distributed. After a day of hard work, the tribe slowly recovered. The next morning, many of those who had regained their strength, holding bowls full of porridge, wept openly. They were sad and grateful to be saved, and they mourned those who hadn't made it. After crying and grieving, they rallied, with the help of the rescue team. They buried the dead where they lay, then, wrapped in thick hides, they all climbed onto the sleds and were pulled back by the rescue team. When the dozens of them came to the Han tribe, their story quickly spread. The Han tribe people sympathized with them and were truly grateful. They were members of the Han tribe, living the good life you had given them. In the following days, many people came to visit and welcome the new members, teaching them how to use things in the Han tribe, and teaching them to speak Chinese so they could adjust to life in the Han tribe. The new tribesmen were touched by the enthusiasm, experiencing life in the Han tribe. They knew that they had made the right decision. They were determined to learn Chinese and integrate into the Han tribe. A few days passed, and it was the end of the second month of winter. The Han tribe's windmill lumber mill was complete. A lot of people were free, and you gave them new jobs. Winter was only half over, and many tribes were running out of food. The tribes with the least food were struggling. There would definitely be people wanting to join the Han tribe. For smaller tribes, it was a disaster, but for you, it was a population gaining opportunity. The Han tribe had about 3,000 people, including slaves. But Hanyang could hold another 2,000 people. You didn't expect to gain 2,000 people in 2 months. You just wanted another 1.0 by spring. So, you sent out 100 cavalry soldiers, divided into 10 teams, heading in all directions. Each team had 10 people, 2 horses per person. And each team had an Azuka giant eagle to scout and carry messages. They were to contact the small tribes with less than 100 people. These small tribes didn't have many people and were prone to food shortages. Maybe they could be persuaded to come over, or they could trade food and hides for people. It shouldn't be difficult, like last winter, when you traded with the Black Rat tribe and the Chestnut tribe. The 10 scouting parties fanned out in different directions. 6 headed east across the river, to due west, and the remaining to ventured north. All regions with limited contact with the Han tribe, according to Yu Fu's intel. The eastern territories held the most smaller tribes, making it the primary focus to maximize efficiency. You carefully tailored the personnel of each team. The eastern contingent, for instance, primarily comprised elders from the Black Rat, Chestnut, and Tree tribes, while the western groups leaned heavily on veterans from the Yunbian tribes. The northern teams were similarly weighted with elders from the Lacquer and Eagle tribes. These individuals were former natives, intimately familiar with the local landscape and acquainted with neighboring tribes. Their involvement would significantly improve the chances of successful negotiation. With these emissaries dispatched, you remained in Hanyang City, awaiting their reports. Meanwhile, construction within the Han tribe continued apace. The completion of the wine-powered hammer and automatic sawmill dramatically boosted the Han tribe's manufacturing capabilities, particularly in woodworking. The lumber mill now churned out hundreds of simple benches daily, a feat of uncomplicated design, consisting of a single plank supported by 4 legs. These basic furnishings were swiftly distributed to every family in the Han tribe, with the responsibility of applying taonghua left to individual households to accelerate the process. Benches, square tables, latticed windows, and wooden doors. These desperately needed furnishings and architectural elements were now regularly produced in the lumber mill, distributed to each family, and transforming the lives and customs of the tribe. The blacksmiths were also tirelessly forging more tools: iron spoons, cleavers, scissors, and, importantly, steel needles. While the demand for steel needles wasn't vast, mastering their production was crucial for the Han tribe, as it required developing metal drawing techniques. The notion of grinding an iron bar into a needle was, frankly, preposterous. The Han tribe had numerous applications for metal wire beyond sewing needles. The most significant was springs. With springs, they could create more sophisticated devices, such as improved looms, clamps, and weapon components. Prior to the discovery of iron ore, you had considered producing springs, but only had access to bronze. While bronze springs were possible, their creation was far more complex, and their performance inferior to that of steel springs, leading you to postpone the project. Bronze, an alloy primarily composed of copper, could be modified by adding different elements. Phosphor bronze, for example, was ideal for springs. Not only did it possess appropriate hardness and excellent elasticity, but it also didn't generate static electricity. Even today, phosphor bronze springs are used in many precision electronic instruments. However, producing phosphor bronze required phosphorus. While abundant in nature, phosphorus wasn't readily available in its elemental form. It was mostly bound within organic matter. Even common wood ash contained significant amounts of phosphorus, making it a natural nitrogen-phosphorus potassium fertilizer. But extraction was complex, far less convenient than evaporating human urine. Now that the Han tribe had access to iron, you abandoned any further consideration of bowling pea. While white phosphorus had other uses, such as making matches or grenade fuses, these were not immediate needs. You simply wanted to make some springs. Steel was the ideal material for strong springs, but it first had to be drawn into wire. Rudimentary metal wire likely existed as early as the spring and autumn period in China. Artisans would melt metal into thin sheets, then hammer and roll them until they were 0.5 millimeters thick. The most skilled craftsmen could cut these sheets into strands less than 0.5 millimeters in diameter, using the resulting gold threads to embroider clothing. However, this wasn't true wire drawing. Genuine wire drawing involved pulling a heated steel rod through a series of progressively smaller holes in a steel plate, making it thinner and rounder. This required crafting a specialized steel drawing plate with a range of calibrated holes. The steel rods could then be heated and drawn through the plate, each successive hole further reducing its diameter. This method remains in use today, even with advanced machinery. The underlying principle persists, much like a generator, which, despite its complexity, still operates by moving a conductor through a magnetic field. Lacking tools to create precise holes in steel, you opted to use the lost wax casting method to create a wire drawing die. The die was then mounted next to the wine-powered hammer, using the windmill's rotation to power a drawing winch. The basic process of metal drawing was simple, and the Han tribe quickly produced metal wire under your guidance, with metal wire in hand. All that remained was to form it into springs of the desired specifications, then harden them through tempering. The same technique could also be used to create finer sewing needles. While you were preoccupied with springs in Hanyang City, the scouting party sent out to attract smaller tribes returned with results. The 10 teams were trickling in, either bringing back traded populations or small tribes willing to join outright. As a result, the Han tribe's population swelled rapidly, increasing by 200 or 300 in a matter of weeks. But that wasn't the most significant development. The teams originally dispatched to find people had stumbled upon an unexpected discovery along the way, one that piqued your interest considerably. You sat at home, listening to the report from the returning cavalry unit led by Feather. They were responsible for scouting the region directly east of the river, a mysterious area the Han tribe had never ventured into before. You yourself had explored 8 Treasures Mountain to the northeast. Yu Fu had led expeditions southeast, and even south into the grasslands, yet the area due east remained untouched, so this unexpected discovery was almost inevitable. Chief, there's no one left living where the old Black Rat tribe used to be. But if you continue eastward from there for 5 days, we found a massive river. It's easily as wide as 7 or 8 houses laid end to end, Feather explained, gesturing at a roughly drawn map, and there's a huge flat plain on the west bank. Feels even bigger than our Hanyang city. I can't say how big exactly, but it's vast. No tribe lives on the plain itself, but there are a few in the surrounding hills within a 2 days' journey. Oh, a river that wide. You studied the crude map with interest. Despite the rough sketches, you could decipher it, drawing on your personal explorations and your innate sense of direction. A river 7 or 8 houses wide. If a Han tribe house was 10 meters, that meant 70 or 80 meters. That qualified as a substantial river, judging by your geographic knowledge. The river's source was likely the marshland system east of 8 Treasures Mountain. The locations mashed up. Where there was water, there was life, plus its proximity to 8 Treasures Mountain meant that if the area could be fortified, it would be strategically advantageous for copper smelting, river transport, and the rich freshwater fish resources. Hanyang City, the Han tribe's first settlement, was quickly approaching its population limit. Planning for the next city was crucial. It couldn't wait until everyone was crammed together. The area with the wide plain and abundant water resources was also ideal for developing agriculture. It took a day's walk from Hanyang City to the old Black Rat territory. Feather said it was another 5 days on horseback to reach the river. Given the snowy terrain and their need to scout, the horses weren't moving quickly. That meant the journey would take about 7 or 8 days on foot, at 20 kilometers a day. That was roughly 150 kilometers if a direct road could be built and a relay station established to change horses. The distance could be covered in 5 or 6 hours at a full gallop, with the Han tribe's current strength. It was entirely feasible to control the area and establish it as the next city, with a small village growing up around the relay station. The reason no tribe lived there was obvious. The abundant water meant abundant wild animals. The wide open plains offered no natural defenses. Tribes without the knowledge to build walls wouldn't dare settle there. It was understandable. Since it was unclaimed land perfectly suited to the Han tribe's needs, a Han tribe should claim it. But there was no rush. These things took time. It had to be approached step by step. The biggest problem with establishing a new city was the Han tribe's limited population. Building a city required manpower, which the Han tribe lacked. Simply sending soldiers to capture people would only create a slave labor force. That was too wasteful for the Han tribe. The best approach was to absorb talent without bloodshed. And you quickly devised a solution. Establish a permanent market there, guarded by a few hundred people. Enough to defend against nearby tribes. Then, through the market, recruit laborers from the surrounding tribes to build the city, working for the Han tribe in exchange for food and goats. It was perfect. Want white salt? No problem. Build a house for the Han tribe and get several pounds of white salt, or some pottery, or cloth. Any goods the Han tribe possessed could be traded, but only for labor. These laborers would come from tribes within a 2 or 3 day radius. They couldn't return home each day, so they'd have to live near the new city, interacting, eating, sleeping, and working alongside the Han people. Once the city was built, they could be offered the opportunity to join the Han tribe and move in. Surely, they would be enticed to live in a city they helped create. In this way, you'd simply spend some goods, essentially selling them to the laborers. And when the city was completed and the laborers joined the Han tribe with their families, those goods would return to the Han tribe. The consumed materials would ultimately benefit your own people. There was no loss. It was like building a city for free and gaining a large population. You were a genius, you thought to yourself. With a plan in place, you felt reassured. The method was highly feasible and required minimal involvement from your own people. The laborers would be recruited from outside, and they would build the entire new city. They would undoubtedly cherish their labor. The plan's beauty lay in its ability to subtly assimilate the laborers during construction. Integrating them into the Han tribe, it was ideally suited for rapid development, enabling the Han tribe to expand quickly in both territory and population. Once the Han tribe's population base grew, this method could be used to dispatch multiple teams simultaneously to build new cities in various locations, leading to a surge in population growth. Having settled on next year's development strategy, it was time to start preparations during the remaining winter months. Manpower wasn't the problem, but resources were. Cargo wagons drawn by oxen and horses, more pottery and white salt, wooden buckets, and plenty of tools, such as axes and saws for logging, shovels for digging, hand carts, brick molds and machinery, tampers, and more agricultural tools for cultivating fields. All of these needed to be prepared in advance. Having charted the course ahead, you dispatch Feather once more, tasking him to lead his squad in a thorough reconnaissance of the designated area. Their mission included identifying a suitable location midway along the route to establish a village and way station, capable of accommodating at least 1,000 souls simultaneously. You issued fresh production directives to the various manufacturing departments of the Han tribe, calling for the large-scale creation of diverse goods. After all, these commodities weren't just for internal consumption within the Han tribe. They also needed to stock the monthly market in Hanyang City, supply next year's trade with the steppe tribes, and only the surplus would be invested in the new settlement. Crunching the numbers, it became clear that the Han tribe's commercial focus should remain firmly on the steppe. The returns from elsewhere simply weren't significant enough. Only the steppe tribes could furnish the Han tribe with resources on the required scale. Consequently, you planned a more extensive range of merchandise for your major customers on the steppe, alongside new stipulations for the resources acquired in return. Previously, Yofu had only procured cattle, horses, sheep, and hides, but from next year onward, the Han tribe would also be acquiring copious quantities of wool. The sheer size of Hanyang City dictated that the number of sheep it could support for grazing was necessarily limited, given the Han tribe's pressing need for wool fiber, which Hanyang City alone could never fulfill. Purchasing it from external sources was the only feasible solution. Currently, the Han tribe's bedding and clothing were remarkably primitive, relying almost exclusively on animal hides. The majority of this year's hemp fiber yield was being turned into ropes and sacks, with only a meager amount woven into linen, barely enough to clothe the elite and the children. This situation was poised to improve in the coming year, with the Han tribe anticipating a greater output of linen. However, linen wasn't exactly ideal for bedding. Or rather, it lacked suitable filling. The Han tribe had yet to discover cotton, forcing them to find alternative materials. Wool emerged as the prime candidate. After washing and fluffing, wool could be turned into a soft, airy fiber, perfect for creating wool quilts, jackets, or padded robes. Wool quilts, mind you, still exist in modern times, commanding surprisingly high prices, on par with silk or down quilts. But in the absence of cotton, developing wool quilts as a substitute was the most logical path forward. Confronted with the looming demands for textiles next year, you once again found yourself back in the metallurgy district, accelerating your work on developing springs, a crucial technology for boosting fabric production. The wire drawing equipment was complete. You personally oversaw its operation, supervising the process of drawing the wire, then heating it red hot before winding it around copper rods. After heating and quenching the spring blank over 2 days, the Han tribe's first spring was finally brought into existence. With the spring in hand, the evolution of the loom could begin. This new generation of loom would incorporate a flying shuttle. Don't underestimate this small component. Its presence would multiply the loom's output by at least 3-fold, perhaps even 6-fold. The Han tribe's first-generation looms had a weaving width of just 1 meter, relying on hand-throwing the shuttle. This limitation stemmed from human anatomy. The distance between a person's hands is finite. A meter was nearly the limit for throwing the shuttle. Anything wider was simply impossible. This was a major factor restricting output. The most skilled weavers using the hand-thrown shuttle could manage just 4 meters of cloth per day, averaging a little over 3. But what if, at the same pace, the weaving width could be doubled? Wouldn't that effectively double the production? Equal length, double the width, meaning double the woven area. The key to resolving this width issue was replacing the hand-thrown shuttle with a spring-propelled flying shuttle. The flying shuttle's mechanism involved creating a wooden channel, or track, beneath the batten, designed to hold the shuttle. At each end of the track, springs were mounted. By pulling a cord to release the spring, the shuttle would be launched across the track to the other side. Completing one throw of the weft thread, this effectively transformed the manual shuttle throw into a semi-automatic, track-guided one. After throwing the shuttle, pulling the batten, then pulling the cord to send the shuttle back along the track, the process became one of relentless repetition. Swing the batten, pull the shuttle control cord, and so on. By simplifying the most complex step, the speed of weaving would increase exponentially, jumping from a little over 3 meters per day to 10. With the width doubled and the length tripled, the woven area per day would increase 6-fold. Moreover, modifying the loom to use a flying shuttle would lower the skill requirements for weavers. Previously, training a skilled hand shuttle weaver was a difficult task. But operating a flying shuttle loom simply involved pulling a cord, removing the need for precise shuttle throws. Even a novice could quickly learn the ropes. The flying shuttle loom's conversion wasn't overly complicated. The core technology resided in the shuttle itself. The other modifications merely involved doubling the machine's width. The batten was removed, replaced by a long wooden track, with springs mounted at each end. The crucial shuttle itself was cast in bronze. The bronze shuttle was much smaller and sleeker than its wooden predecessor. Consequently, it could hold less of thread at a time. To address this, you decreed that each flying shuttle loom would be equipped with two bronze shuttles, allowing for quick replacements when one ran out of thread. It could be swapped for the other in a flash. The entire modification project took a week. Finally, the Han tribe possessed its first loom capable of weaving 2-meter-wide cloth, with semi-automatic shuttle throws, producing 10 meters of fabric per day. This marvel of engineering instantly attracted a crowd of onlookers. Even Shan from the braid-making clan came to your house to try out the new flying shuttle loom for herself. The wondrous flying shuttle technology elicited constant praise from the women of the braid-making clan, but you paid them no heed. You knew that the advent of the flying shuttle loom would trigger a chain reaction. Mirroring historical events, the increased fabric production would soon lead to a shortage of yarn, prompting the revolution of the spinning wheel, the invention of the jenny, capable of spinning multiple threads simultaneously. Knowing the consequences, you weren't about to wait for the problem to arise before addressing it. So, while working on the flying shuttle loom, you decided to overhaul the spinning wheel as well. This didn't prove to be a challenge. Your history textbooks from your previous life contained extensive sections on a spinning jenny, complete with detailed illustrations and explanations of its operating principles. You remembered these vividly, as it was a trigger to the first industrial revolution, and the textbooks described it in extreme detail. You gathered a group of carpenters and, over several days, constructed a jenny that could spin 10 threads simultaneously, powered by a foot-operated flywheel, increasing production tenfold. The construction of the lumber mill dramatically accelerated the Han tribe's production of wooden goods, and furniture was swiftly distributed to every household. Witnessing this success, Lin Muton, leader of the carpentry team, immediately proposed building a windmill-powered lumber mill. Considering the future needs of the new city, you nodded in agreement. After all, there was spare land. Time to kill during the winter months, and better to be productive than idle. Another month buzzed by in a flurry of activity, bringing the end of the third month of winter. The cavalry squads dispatched to search for and trade for people gradually returned with a stream of those too impoverished to feed themselves. Though the numbers brought back each time were modest, they added up to a significant total of over 480 individuals, once again elevating the Han tribe's population to a new tier. During this month, Feather's squad, responsible for scouting the due east direction, systematically charted the terrain, finally presenting you with a detailed sketch, providing you with a tangible understanding of the area's topography. However, this wasn't enough. City construction was a monumental undertaking, and your personal oversight was still essential. At the beginning of the fourth month of winter, You entrusted the care of Hanyang City to Big Tree, the Elder, and Shrew Shaman, and personally led Shrew Big, Blood Butcher, Ling Feng, Beast Fang, and Feather's cavalry squad, a company of 15, to survey the environment at the prospective city site. The entire party rode horses, everyone else had 2 mounts. Except for you, who rode an elephant pair, Meatball and Grey Mountain. The 2 little pachyderms had been cooped up in Hanyang City for far too long, so this was the perfect opportunity to let them stretch their legs. Watching the 2 lads' ever-expanding physiques, you worried that in a couple of years, they wouldn't even be able to fit through Hanyang City's gates. It seemed the new city's gates would have to be built even larger, with 2 horses taking turns pulling the sled. Progress across the snow-covered ground was swift. The party reached the great river that Feather had described in just 2 days. The great river was frozen over, but not entirely. Across the approximately 80-meter-wide riverbed, a 10-meter-wide section in the middle was still showing water. The eastern bank of the great river was lined with sparse woods and shrubs stretching as far as the eye could see, while the western bank was dominated by extensive shrubs and wild grasses. Indeed, it was a large plain, as Feather had reported. You had also brought a specially designed measuring tape, a chopstick-thick hemp rope, 1,000 meters long, with a knot tied every meter, and each knot dyed a different color for easy length identification. The party quickly began measuring, one person holding the rope's end, another letting it out, while riding a horse. Back and forth they went, repeatedly, spending the entire morning completing the measurements. The small plain was bordered by the great river to the east, and was 18 kilometers deep to the west. The plain was approximately 30 kilometers east to west, and further exploration in both directions revealed rising mountain terrain. According to Feather, the surrounding tribes dwelled within those mountains. The topography was indeed well suited for building a city, and the flat land was suitable for farming. At 30 kilometers north to south and 18 kilometers east to west, it covered a total of 800 mu. In comparison, the plains around Hanyang City were only a few thousand mu. The difference was vast. If this much land were used to grow crops, it could feed a massive population. The new city built here would have to be grand. A landmark city, the central hub of a province. A provincial capital, if 2 mu of land could feed 1 person. This area could theoretically sustain 400.00 people. With 400.00 people, you'd probably have to kidnap everyone within 1,000 li radius to reach that number. Therefore, the city's construction would have to be phased, starting with an inner city, then leaving ample space outside for expansion, gradually building outwards in concentric circles, creating a massive city divided into rings, like a giant target. Planning such a colossal city wasn't a task that could be accomplished in a day or 2, so you decided to return and give it more thought. In the meantime, the party ventured into the nearby mountains to survey the natural resources. This was essential: timber, minerals, and animal life. However, after an afternoon of exploring the northern mountains, you didn't discover anything particularly special. Just common trees and tangled shrubs. But just as the party was about to leave, an unexpected discovery, Ling Feng, caught your attention. It turned out that Ling Feng's horse, while grazing on withered grass, had accidentally been caught by the surrounding vegetation. Being a steppe nomad, Ling Feng cared deeply for his horses, and couldn't help but feel pained. He grumbled as he walked, complaining that the grass in these mountains was like knives. Nothing like the good grazing grass on the steppe. You examined the horse's wounds. They weren't serious, just a few bloody cuts. The cuts weren't deep, merely breaking the skin. However, their location was peculiar, all on the horse's shoulder, and multiple cuts at that. This struck you as odd. What kind of grass could inflict such wounds? You asked Ling Feng to lead you to the spot. You were quickly taken to a patch of tall, withered grass, resembling reeds. It was very tall, a cluster reaching over 2 meters. The leaves were sword-shaped, each roughly 2 centimeters wide. The yellowed leaves were stiff, standing upright, and looked somewhat like orchids, but when you touched the leaves, you discovered their unique characteristic. The swordgrass leaves were thick in the middle, about 4 millimeters, but the edges were extremely thin, like the blade of a sword. They were like long swords springing from the ground. The swordgrass leaves were stiff, not easily broken, and also resilient. This immediately sparked an idea. This plant could be used as a substitute for bamboo. The properties of swordgrass would enable it to create many of the same items. Moreover, the swordgrass was long enough, over 2 meters tall, making it an ideal material for weaving mats. By trimming off the edges of the grass leaves and splitting the thick middle section along the veins, two long strips similar to bamboo splints could be created. These could then be arranged together using hemp thread to form a mat. Of course, it wouldn't be limited to just mats. If it could be used for mats, then curtains and screens could also be made. It could also be woven into containers, such as baskets, fish traps, conical hats, or steamers. It could even be used to make lanterns. Most of the items that could be made from bamboo could also be made from swordgrass, making it an excellent bamboo substitute. You immediately recorded this plant, marking it as a key species for future observation. In addition to food crops, this material crop was an essential resource for development. The group camped in the northern mountains for the night, planning to explore the southern mountains the next day to see if there were any unique resources. That night, moderate snowfall occurred, but fortunately, everyone had brought enough animal hides, and the campsite was in a sheltered hollow, with plenty of firewood to burn, so it wasn't too cold. The next morning, after the snow stopped, the sky cleared. Everyone had a steaming bowl of salted pork congee, and then promptly headed towards the southern mountains. After about an hour, the dozen or so people were deep in the mountains. Compared to the northern side, the southern mountains were steeper and rockier. However, you didn't find any useful mineral resources. Instead, there were abundant forest resources. Basically a lot of trees, and there were several species you had never seen before. One particular tree piqued your interest. It was a tall, straight tree, each one over 10 meters high, with a dense canopy, like a large umbrella, with a diameter of over 10 meters. And the trunk diameter was about half a meter. But that wasn't the most amazing thing. What attracted you the most was its bark. The bark of this tree was off-white, with a very fine texture, but it felt rough to the touch. With a rustling sound, it wasn't sturdy and could be easily peeled off by hand. When rubbed in your hands, it could be rubbed into a large ball of fluffy fibers. The fibers were fine, long, and very tough, not easily broken, making them an excellent fire starter. However, that was just one of its uses. Soon you discovered something even more amazing about this tree. Amazingly, the inside of the tree was hollow, containing a large amount of pulpy liquid. During the winter, water freezes, and after freezing for a long time, it not only doesn't shrink, but it expands as it gets colder. We all know this. For example, if you leave a bowl of water outside in the winter, after freezing overnight, the surface of the ice will bulge into a bubble. This was no exception here. Such a tree containing a large amount of water also couldn't escape this law. You found a tree that had been cracked by the frost among the same species of trees nearby. The pulp inside the tree had expanded after freezing, cracking the bark and exposing the contents. Only then did you realize that this tree had a hollow structure. The pulp that had expanded out was milky white, frozen solid, but when cut with a sword, it was easy to see that the tree pulp was made of the same material as the bark, containing a large amount of fiber. This major discovery made you very happy. You had seen dragon blood trees that could flow red juice, and trees that contained a large amount of clear water. But you never thought that there would be trees in this world that contained fibrous pulp. If this stuff was diluted, wouldn't it be natural pulp? Using it for papermaking would even save the pulping step. The northern mountains had swordgrass for making mats, and the southern mountains had pulp trees to provide pulp. Now the raw materials for papermaking and the tools for making paper were all gathered. It seemed that the Han tribe's papermaking industry was destined to flourish in the new city. It was as if God was helping. It was all thanks to your personal inspection. Otherwise, these primitive natives wouldn't know how to utilize things even if they were placed right in front of them. That's why the vision of modern people is so important. It seemed that you would have to personally visit every new area that was developed. This major discovery made you ecstatic. You asked everyone to search carefully to see if there were many of these pulp trees, and whether the future production of papermaking raw materials would be large enough. You also told everyone seriously that this tree was very important and must be protected. In the future, you couldn't cut down a pulp tree and cutting down trees. Everyone spent another day wandering around the southern mountains and found that the number of pulp trees was really quite large, accounting for 3/10 of the entire forest. This was really good news. There were many other tree species as well. You also discovered a spice-producing tree in a valley, which was star anise, the star anise we commonly use. Many people may not know that star anise grows on trees, just like chestnuts, wrapped in the fruit of the tree. Peeling off the outer skin reveals the star anise inside. Star anise is green when harvested and must be boiled in boiling water for 10 minutes, then taken out and dried. After a few days of natural drying, it can be turned into the star anise we usually use in cooking. There were also some fruit trees, although there were no fruits on them. Judging from the shape of the trees, they looked a lot like pear trees. It's just unknown what kind of pears grew on them. These tall pear trees could not only be used to harvest fruits, but also could be used as wood for high-end furniture, even in modern times. Tear wood is very valuable, especially huanhuali. As for other tree species, there were more locust trees, willows, poplars, and pine trees, and they grew in different locations, but they were all useful timber. After surveying the small plain and the mountains to the north and south, the group headed west back, and you asked to stop by the place selected by Feather to establish a village. This was a valley, and the bottom of the valley was a road connecting the east and west directions. The mountains on both sides of the valley were not very steep, and the slopes were very gentle, with a large number of trees and shrubs. There were also mountain springs and streams nearby as a water source, so the water problem was solved. You looked around at the bottom of the valley, and it was very suitable to designate a gentle slope here as a village. After cleaning up the surrounding slopes, they could be turned into terraced fields, and it would be no problem to plant rice or wheat and feed about 1,000 people, and raising some livestock would fully meet the needs. A mountain village could be built here, mainly as a transfer station between Hanyang City and the new city. It could be built into a supply center for passers-by, and a small horse farm could be built as a post station for people to change horses. A hotel would also have to be built in the village to provide accommodation services. Although there wasn't much good land here, it was excellent for developing animal husbandry, especially suitable for building a large chicken farm, free range. The Han tribe mainly raised red-tailed black-feathered chickens. In addition, since it was located on an important transportation line, the trade and turnover of goods would definitely greatly promote the economic development of the mountain village. Even if the people here didn't grow food, they could make a lot of money just by developing the service industry. However, this would have to wait until the new city was built. The initial development of the mountain village would definitely have to grow food. Once it was developed, the farmland could be changed to grow a large area of cash crops, such as lacquer grass or rami, which would be good directions for development. More fruits and melons could also be planted to provide fresh fruits for the hotel in the mountain village. After 7 days, the scouting party returned to the Han tribe, and you obtained the most detailed survey data, ready to plan the construction of the new city in Hanyang City. However, there was no need to rush, as the entire Han tribe would need to mobilize for spring plowing once spring arrived. Any plans would have to wait until after that. Time flew by. In the last month of winter, the cavalry teams trading outside brought back another 300 people, adding the 30+ who had voluntarily come to the Han tribe, and the people brought back in the previous 2 months. The total population increase for the winter was 817. The total population of the Han tribe barely reached 4,000, even with the slaves included. Spring returned to the earth, marking another new year. You finally reached the standard for adulthood, 12 years old. However, since a year here had 14 months, converting it to Earth time meant you were 14 years old. A proper 8th grade middle schooler. Moreover, due to the improved living standards last year, with plenty of meat and rice, your height had shot up to 1.75 meters. This was the age when boys went through a crazy growth spurt. Along with your coming of age, the Han tribe also saw a new batch of adults, though not many, only around 100. These were the youths from the Black Rat tribe, Yu tribe, Li tribe, and Bian tribe. The rest of the tribesmen had joined last year, either newly adults, or too old or too young. The Han tribe's foundation was still too shallow. Most of the tribesmen were new additions. But what could you do? With the arrival of spring, the annual grand sacrifice was held as usual. However, this year's sacrifice was special. It wasn't just for the Han tribe's own people, because with spring, the monthly market also reopened. But this first market of the year wasn't for trading goods. It was for the tribes who had learned to cultivate rice to come and learn spring plowing from the Han tribe. Besides learning the timing and experience of spring plowing, the annual large-scale matchmaking event was also moved to the Han tribe's market. The spring social usually lasted for several days, but this year there was also spring plowing to consider. Going to Ramu Water Valley as usual would be too much of a waste of time. It would be better to hold it while everyone was at the market. Since the matchmaking event was being held, many people came from each tribe. The chiefs or Wasan elders led the teams personally, along with about 10 strong warriors and 20 or 30 newly adults. Each tribe had about 40 people, and with dozens of tribes combined, the assembled population reached over 1,000. All camped on the pasture west of Hanyang City, a dense mass of people. Most of these people were visiting the Han tribe for the first time, especially the newly adults, who had never left their tribe too far before adulthood. Although they had heard stories from their tribesmen about how amazing the Han tribe's market was, it was nothing compared to seeing it in person in 3 days. Almost all the tribes that were coming had arrived. On the morning of the 4th day, the Han tribe held a grand sacrificial ceremony and even allowed these tribes to observe. You intentionally wanted to showcase the strength of the Han tribe through the ceremony. On the morning of the 4th day, all the rawhide drums on the 4 walls of Hanyang City were moved to the top of the west gate. A tall flagpole was erected above the west gate tower. Though it wasn't flying a flag yet, dawn, 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 dawn. As the sun was about to rise into view from the west wall, the 8 large drums on the west wall of Hanyang City suddenly sounded. The 1,000+ people gathered outside the city were startled by the thunderous drumming and gathered together. Looking up at the top of the west city wall, accompanied by the slow, rhythmic drumming, the wooden drawbridge of the west gate slowly lowered, finally landing on the opposite bank of the moat with a thud. A huge vermilion wooden door was revealed on the city wall. After a series of creaking sounds, both the inner and outer gates opened. The tribesmen, who had been preparing inside the city, lined up and marched out of the west gate, quickly forming a square formation in front of the west gate. Except for the slaves, who were locked in a warehouse, all the other tribesmen came out. The procession was so long it seemed endless, leaving the outsiders secretly astonished. My God, how many people are there in the Han tribe? Seeing these 1-0 people coming to the matchmaking event these past few days, I already thought it was a lot, several times more than our tribe. I didn't expect the Han tribe to have several times more people than all the dozens of tribes coming to the matchmaking event combined. The Han tribe is really too big, a young man who was visiting the market for the first time said, in shock. Yad, there are so many people in the Han tribe. Hey, I think I saw my brother. He joined the Han tribe at last year's spring social. I really want to join the Han tribe too. The Han tribe is too awesome. A newly adult girl next to him jumped up and down, pointing to a relative in the crowd and introducing him to the people next to her, appearing very excited and proud, as if being able to join the Han tribe was the most worthwhile thing to brag about. The crowd was buzzing with excitement, all marveling at the strength of the Han tribe. However, this didn't affect the Han tribe's sacrificial ceremony. The tribesmen quickly marched out of the west gate and formed a square formation outside the west gate. The children stood in the front, the women holding infants in the middle, and the strong young men of the Han tribe on the outer perimeter. Just as the square formation was completed, the drumming on the city wall finally stopped. Then, several people were seen on the city wall carrying something and walking to the battlements. They tied several 2-meter wide yellow linen scrolls to the city wall and suddenly let them go. The scrolls automatically fell downwards, eventually unfurling completely and hanging on the outer wall of the city. The scroll in the very center had 4 black characters written on it: Xiaojing Zuxian, respect ancestors. On either side were Wugu Fengden, abundant harvests; Liu Chu Fanyan, thriving livestock; Rending Xingwan, prosperous population; and Ciji Ping'an, peace in all seasons. Each character was nearly 2 square meters in size, and they were extremely conspicuous hanging on the city wall. The appearance of the scrolls quickly caused another commotion in the observing crowd. Many young men and women pointed to the 5 scrolls and shouted loudly, "Look, look, I've seen those Hanzi Chinese characters. There are these characters on the porcelain bowl I eat from. I can even read them. That Wugu Fengdang is praying for a good rice harvest, so we can get more grain. I really like eating that rice now." A young man in the crowd said loudly, pointing at the scroll, "I also know those Hanzi. That Rending Xingwan is praying for the tribesmen to have more children, so the tribe will have more and more people. It's also on my bowl. I also know that Liu Chu Fanyan, our chief, said it's about the wild beasts that the Han tribe raises. It's to make the wild beasts have more cubs, but I don't know what Liu Chu are." A young man also spoke the Hanzi on the scroll, but he didn't understand the meaning. However, this confusion would soon be cleared up for them as the sacrifice progressed. After the scroll was put down, thunderous drum sounds rang out again. A procession soon emerged from the city gates, consisting of the Han tribe's Liu Chu. There were 3 male and 3 female Yenyu, -1 horses, 3 black and 3 white Mianyang, 6 Huaju, 6 Gaobalinyuing, and 6 Yang Tuo, all led by a team of people to the front of the square formation. As for the others, such as Zhao Lu, Zeburo, Rabbits, Wu Yuji, Conxian, Li Shu, none of them made an appearance, because they weren't the Han tribe's main domesticated livestock, but rather species about to be eliminated, or special pets, not within the scope of the Liu Chu. The appearance of the Liu Chu's procession quickly stirred up the audience again, with many people rushing to the sides of the square formation, squeezing to the front row to observe the Han tribe's Liu Chu. Wow, not only does the Han tribe have a lot of people and know how to grow grain, but they also raise so many beasts. That's all meat. Does the Han tribe not even need to hunt anymore? They must have a lot more of these beasts. Exclamations rang out from the crowd. It's not just for eating meat. Did you see those 2 tallest Niu and horses? Those beasts are for pulling carts. Before last winter, the Han tribe's Niu Shan Mosh even went to our tribe to pull rice straw. I heard that rice straw is used to feed these Liu Chu. I've seen it too. I've seen it too. The Han tribe's Niush also went to our tribe to pull rice straw. So rice straw is used to feed these Liu Chu. The Han tribe is too awesome. The rice they grow produces grain for people to eat, and the remaining rice straw can be used to feed the Liu Chu. That way they have both grain and meat, without wasting anything at all. Not just that, I've been to the market before and heard the Han tribe people say that the livestock shit and piss are poked in pits to decompose, then buried in the fields, which makes the grain grow even more. No way, even shit and piss aren't wasted. So shit and piss have this use. The person next to him was stunned. The crowd's noise under the city walls was constant, and the drum sounds on the city walls became more urgent. As the rhythm of the drums accelerated, a procession soon appeared on the city walls. 4 high-level people wearing tin crowns, Shuda, Yingrui, Dashu, and Z2, jointly held a bright red banner, stepping to the beat of the drums to the flagpole on the city walls. Behind them followed the group leaders of various departments, holding bronze spears, and you led the way in front with a sword at your waist. When the group escorted the tribal flag to the flagpole, with the sound of a sword drawn by you, the 8 big drums instantly fell silent, and the 4 people holding the flag began to tie the flag to the flagpole. After the flag was tied, you held the long sword, facing the crowd below the city, suddenly raised the sword Tianzinu to the sky, and shouted to the crowd below the city, "Raise the tribal flag, attention, dong, 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 dong." The drum sounds rang out again. Dashu, hearing the drum sounds, grabbed the flag and threw it forcefully towards the upper left sky. The bright red flag instantly unfolded in the morning breeze. The bright red flag, 2 meters wide and nearly 4 meters long, had a bright yellow center with a large Han character printed in black ink, and slowly rose into the sky with the rhythm of the drums. The crowd watching the ceremony under the city walls also watched the Han character flag slowly rise. Although they were still discussing and whispering, seeing such a solemn moment, the sound of their voices couldn't help but be lowered a lot. "I recognize that character. That's the Han tribe's Han. There's a particularly large one on the sacks for holding grain. I've seen it too. There's one on the buckets we bought from the tribe. Shh, don't talk. Don't you see that their tribe people are all looking at that character? This should be their tribe's god. They're worshipping now. Don't talk nonsense, or their god will punish you. The surrounding people instantly shut up when they heard this, and silently watched the flag raising. After the flag raising ended, the drum sounds also fell silent again. According to the custom of last year, you again said a passage of prayer to the ancestors, and words to encourage the tribe people to work hard. Then all the tribe people bowed to the tribal flag and the scroll, bowing 3 times in a row, and the sacrificial process ended. After the sacrifice was completed, the scroll would temporarily remain hanging for the whole day today, until it was taken down in the evening. The tribe people again lined up to enter the city, sent their children home, and then did whatever they needed to do. As the crowd dispersed, several Muse soon drove out from the west gate, carrying various goods and appearing outside the city again, then displaying many new goods for sale. This time there were very few pottery items, but there were new goods such as iron pots and iron spoons, as well as delicate things such as steel needles, wool, and scissors. In addition, there were also some wooden square tables and wooden benches of various sizes, displayed in several sets. Also, iron agricultural tools were not uncommon, such as hoes, sickles, and human-powered plows, all appearing at the market. These things were terribly expensive. Anything related to metal, the Han tribe required to be exchanged for people. But this time those tribes didn't bring anything else, just a lot of people, so they also traded with the Han tribe, exchanging for a few urgently needed commodities, such as iron pots and hoes. The Han tribe also absorbed about 300 people again because of these transactions. In the time that followed, the east gate of Hanyang City was wide open, and many Niu and horses came out from inside, pulling plows to begin spring plowing. The prepared decomposed fertilizer was also added to the soil together, and then turned underground by the iron plow, directly buried under the soil. Seeing the Han tribe spring plowing, those tribes who came to learn also quickly followed, constantly praising how convenient it was for the Han tribe to have Niu and horses, while they still had to painfully slash and burn. The human-powered plows in their tribes were all made of wood and stone, and the quality was far from that of the Han tribe. The Han tribe's spring plowing area this year was very large. In addition to the nearly 1,000 mu of paddy fields from last year, the fields on the east bank of the small river were also clear in one winter. The shrubs were cut down to be used as firewood, and the trees were sawed into timber reserves. Even the tree roots that were deeply rooted in the soil were completely cleared. The cultivated fields on the opposite side of the river were a square with sides of 1 kilometer, with a combined area of 1,500 mu. You plan to allocate this year's newly added wheat to the planting area on the east bank, planting half of the seeds first, to see how the artificial planting effect would be. The wheat experimental fields were also divided into several areas, planted with different spacing, to see which method had the highest yield. This was also unavoidable. After all, you had never farmed in your previous life, and you really hadn't researched planting, so now you can only rely on yourself to explore more.